All right. Hi, my name is Rob, and this is just a quick demonstration for CurviBlend, which is a new Blender add-on. CurviBlend is a surfacing tool which takes any set of Bezier curves which connect to form closed loops and creates patch surfaces from them. I've got a few scenarios set up here that I wanted to quickly run through just to show you CurviBlend's features and capabilities, and basically run through how it all works. So starting off down here, we've got the sort of most basic example where we've got two equal point count Bezier curve pairs. And basically what that means is the curve on the right hand side here and the curve on the left, they're gonna both have the same point counts, and the top and bottom will also have the same point counts. So I've got these mesh objects set up just to show you where those curve points lie without needing to be in edit mode. And we can see the right hand side has 55, left hand side 55, and then the bottom we've got 41, and the top also has 41. Cool, so let's start our first patch. When we do create a patch, CurviBlend is going to ignore those mesh objects and just filter them out, so we only use the curve objects. So let's create a patch. Great. And you can see when we have those equal point count pairs that all our curves are going to get a direct match with that surface, with the vertices on the surface, which is really great. And that is because our default UV segment values are going to be set to match those points. So where we had 41 top and bottom, the U segments have been set to 40, and then where we had 55 left and right, those V segments have been set to 54. Great. I just wanted to also quickly show the bilinear versus bicubic patch. And this is the algorithm which is used to basically form those internal vertices. So if I switch this off, you can see we do get a little bit of sagging. I've tried to line that up with the grid line there. That's the best way I can show it here. And hopefully you can see that in the video. But yeah, you can see we get a little bit of sagging there, and that's because the bilinear patch is using a G0 curvature, whereas the bicubic uses G1. So the tangency from curve to curve sort of looks a lot more natural in a lot of cases. There are some cases where you'll want the bilinear, and I'll show those later, but for the most part, bicubic is the way to go. It's a little bit more, a little bit slower to compute, but in most of the scenarios I've tested with, I haven't really noticed too much of a difference, so something to keep in mind. Moving on, wanted to show what happens in situations where we don't have matching point counts per pair. So here we've got the original 55, but on our left-hand curve, we've only got 54. And then again, the bottom has 41, and the top only has these two corner vertices or control points. So in this scenario, if we create a patch, you'll see that we do still get a really nice looking surface. In situations like this, we need to determine a HPC and an LPC. So that basically stands for high point count and low point count per pair. So where we had the 55 on the right hand side, that's going to become our high point count curve, and the 54 on the left hand side will be our low point count. And then same situation for top and bottom, where we had 41 high point count, top, low point count. And yeah, you can see on the top where we only had these corner vertices, it doesn't really matter where the HPC curve points are going to be projected to, because we don't need to match any internal points here along that LPC. But in situations where we did need to match, you can see that we don't quite get that, because the HPC is going to be projected proportionally and transferred across to the LPC. So yeah, that's sort of the nature of that. We still get a really nice, clean, smooth surface, but our edge points are not going to line up. We've got some measures to counteract this. The first being this adhere to input points snap. So when we open that up, we get this snap tolerance. And what that's going to allow us to do is basically set a tolerance value in which a snap will occur. So when we start to move this value up, you'll start to see some of these surface edge vertices snapping to the input points of the LPC. So I'll start to move that up, and you can see some snaps starting to happen, which is great. I'll just set that to a nice high value. And you can see that all points ended up getting a snap, and then this one point up here, the extra one basically, just landed somewhere on the curve. And that's going to depend on the scenario. So it's still a very nice smooth surface, but now all of our points have gotten a match, which is great. Moving on to manual reversal. So while we might want to use any of these checkboxes down here, if I come in and select this curve, and I'll select this curve as well, jump into edit mode. So you can see the direction of these curves have been altered. So this one's been reversed. And other than that, these sets of curves are identical. Just this direction has been changed. But when I come in and create a patch here with that same high snap tolerance value, you'll see that, that edge is not quite snapping how we would want. And some points have just been snapped and not gotten a match, which is okay. It'll depend on your set of input curves and how high you set this snap tolerance value, basically, whether or not you see some undesirable sort of snapping happen towards the ends. But that's why we've got these manual reversal checkboxes, and basically what that's going to do is come in and switch that curve direction before the patch occurs. So we don't know exactly, it's not, we just have to trial and error to figure out which curve that might be. So when we select these, we can see that it must be 4, and we can uncheck those ones. But yeah, what you can see when we do find which curve that is and reverse it, we get that same snap as what we got over here, which is in this case a more desirable result. But yeah, again, just trial and error depending on your situation. I did want to quickly show, so these are just mesh loops, and I wanted to show how grid fill would work in these situations because it did recently get an update. And in situations where we do have this matching opposite curve pair point counts, grid fill will usually do a pretty good job. You can see here, that's honestly for most situations, that's going to be pretty good. It is a bilinear patch, so you can see that you do just still have that G0 tangency rather than G1. So if you wanted a G1, CurviBlend would be the option. But for a lot of situations, that'd be fine. And again, that's when you have matching point counts. In a situation where you don't, it becomes a little trickier, and grid fill won't do as good of a job. So obviously you could come in here and subdivide this edge. I'm not going to do that now. You would need to figure out how many points you've got along here, how many points you've got along here, and then add your one here, subdivide this. Not the hardest thing to do, but again, just takes you out of the flow a little bit. CurviBlend is going to be a lot quicker and again give you a better bicubic result if you choose. So moving on, I wanted to show quickly the proportional matching, which was happening in the previous examples, but it's a lot clearer to see when you've got a bunch of vertices up in a corner or wherever they might lie across your surface. So in this scenario, we can see we had a bunch of vertices up here and a bunch down here, and they're proportionally matched across to the LPC. So the top curve in this situation was the HPC, and again, the right was the HPC. So you can see that the LPCs don't get a match here. And again, we can come in, turn this adherence on, and depending on how our snaps look, we can maybe reverse a curve or two and get a better result. Also, if we didn't want such a high snap tolerance value for whatever reason, we can go ahead and turn that down, and you'll see some points get a snap, some don't. But what we can do, another way of counteracting this sort of result, is turning on rectify input curves. And basically what that's going to do is any point that didn't get a snap is going to be rectified and just thrown straight back on that input curve. You will want to have some sort of an adherence, snap tolerance in this situation. So if you set this to 0, for example, you'll start to see some pretty ugly overlaps. And that's because basically there are 2 points here now because no snap was happening. So all curves are being rectified regardless of if there's actually a point very, very close. So you want to set this to at least something. Even then, you will still find that there are some artifacts, which you can see with these grooves here. That's not really desirable. So what we can do in this situation is to just use Blender's built-in vertice smooth. And what I like to do is select the border and then select the internal. So only these internal vertices are getting smoothed and the boundaries are going to stay locked basically. So when we come in here and smooth those vertices out, turn that one up, and then you can see those ridges have sort of been all sorted out, and we get nice quad surfaces still. Cool. Moving on to 2 curve inputs. So in the situation where we only have 2 curves that we want to patch together, we can do this, but CurviBlend is going to basically do some stuff in the background to make this work. In the situation of 2 curves, we create that patch, and you can't really see what's happening, but behind the scenes, CurviBlend has added a 0 length curve in this corner here, and one here as well. And that lets us have those 4 input curves needed to create the patch. And yeah, you're free to go about how you would usually edit or manipulate these settings, same as you would with any other combination of curves, which is really great. 3 curves. So in this situation, rather than having the 1, 2, we've got this top one being split in half. So we have 3, meaning that we only need CurviBlend to add one of those 0 length curves for us. But in the situation of 2, we had 2 junction points. In this situation, we now have 3. So we've got this one here, this one at the top, and this one in this bottom corner too. So when we create a patch, we've now got the option to either have that 0 length curve placed at the top, which is this option 0, placed in this bottom left corner, or placed in the bottom right corner, which is pretty handy. Also, this may be an example where you would want to have the Bicubic unchecked. So if I set these values a little higher, and then we check on Bicubic, that looks okay. They both look relatively similar, honestly, but if we create it from here and then we turn Bicubic on, you can see you get some curvature along what you would assume would just be a linear sort of patch. So up to you, whatever you'd prefer there, but yeah, good to know you've got the option. Again, I just want to quickly show, this is a very similar example, except these now have some curvature and some height to them. So 2 curves create that patch, and it's not quite what you would expect. So in this situation, you would maybe want to break that top curve up and use a 3 curve patch instead, and then you have that option. And yeah, just again, something to note. Cool. Moving on to our 5 curves. So again, CurviBlend needs 4 curves to create the patch. So in this situation, what's going to happen is CurviBlend will initially pick 2 opposite curves to each other, and then any curves it finds in between will be merged together. So I'll show you what that looks like. We can turn off that adherence for now. Cool. So what's happened here is we've got these 2 curves in the bottom corner being matched, or being merged together, I should say. So that means that CurviBlend determined we've got an opposite along here. That's one of our curves, and then another opposite here. And then from there, it said, all right, any curve I find in between, or any set of curve I find in between these two curves are going to be merged together. And you can see by that ridge that these two are the ones it chose. So if we go to the next option, again, up here were merged. These two here were merged. That's 4 of 4. So we can go back to option 0 and see some other options. Cool. Up here, these two were merged. And yeah, anywhere that a merge occurs, you're going to see some sort of unnatural ridge line, basically, because that's a really sharp intersection. So again, what we can do in this situation is to jump into edit mode, select the boundary, and select those internals, and then smooth those out. And that's going to give us much less of a ridge. Just something to be careful of. I've noticed in a lot of situations when you do that, this corner is going to sort of sink in a little bit. And yeah, you'll find in a lot of situations you'll have corners where they're not quite accurate anymore once you've smoothed your vertices out. So just something to be aware of. Next up, I'll leave that as it is. Next up, we've got a 7 curve input. So again, you're going to start to see more and more of those ridge artifacts the more curves you try and input. So obviously that's not a very desirable result. You've got a lot more options also now to choose from, however. So eventually you might find something that you like. But if you turn that wireframe back on, it's again not the nicest surface. So in those situations, I would usually recommend breaking them up into sort of pieces. So in this example, what we can do is separate this top out, create that patch, and then we can just drag this one over here. And that's going to be a much nicer result. Just like that. Moving on, we have HPC Adhere and HPC Rectify. So these are very similar to the original Adhere and Rectify, except those original ones just work for the LPC curves. And basically that's because usually, unless U and V segment values have been manually adjusted, the HPC curves are always going to be matched. So yeah, these are for when you've manually adjusted those, whether or not you wanted more or less resolution. These options are now available to you. So if we just switch this over and jump into show that wireframe, cool. So you can see now that all of these are getting a match. I should note that the left and right point counts do match in this case, but you'll see when we start to change the values it won't matter because yeah, when we change the U and V segment values, we're going to get a surface that strays away from the input points anyway. So when we turn on our adhere, we can see, I've got rectify on as well. So we can see when we turn on that adhere, the LPC is going to get a match. And I should also say, when we've got matching point counts on a pair, there is going to be still an LPC and a HPC just arbitrarily determined by CurviBlend so that we can use the adhere for both sides of the patch. So when we turn on adhere, we can see this is determined to be the LPC, so we get that snap, but no snap on the HPC. We can then turn on rectify, and because these points have been rectified and these ones line up pretty closely, they will then be matched. You can see that this one hasn't been matched. So in this case, maybe we can turn on HPC adhere. Great. Works how we would expect. And then I've had to budge this point up quite a bit just so that we can see what happens when we turn that HPC rectify on, and then again working as we would expect. Great. Cool, moving on. We've got this very simple set of curves. And again, it's 3, so we'll have the option to select a matching option, basically. And what happens when we want to increase the resolution of this? So we can set these however high we want. And you can see that it does add that geometry for us, but it's still a very limited interpretation of that surface, because it's going to add those points, but it's going to add them directly onto the surface, the original input curves. So what we can do in these situations, and I'll just show you without shade smooth and without the wireframe. So that's basically the exact same result we would get if this was set to 4 and 4, except that we've got the internal segments as well. But what we can do is use our interpolated curves. So when we switch that on, you can see that we now get a really nice smooth interpolation, basically. And you can see what's happened is the input curves have been interpolated, and then the points which were added, the extra resolution which was added, was all snapped to those interpolated input curves. And when I turn on shade smooth, that'll look even nicer. Great. What can we do from here? So say we did want our interpolated surface, but we still wanted the edges to line up. We can then snap our boundary points, and I'll jump into wireframe again. So you can see that with this pre-interpolated checkbox ticked, those pre-interpolated positions are going to be snapped to, which is sometimes more desirable than having that just snap to the original input points. Cool. Moving on from there, we've got our groups, which is sort of where the non-destructive workflow starts to come into play, but also is a really good example of what happens when our Bezier curves don't have any actual vertices. So far, we've been using Bezier curves which have a vertice or control point at each segment, basically. But these Bezier curves are the default Bezier curves that you'll be given when you control a add Bezier curve. And this curve is basically just derived from the segment handle orientation. So these rotations here have determined that curvature. So what happens when we try and create a patch? I can turn all these off for now. What happens when we try and create a patch from Bezier curve segments that don't have control points at each segment? Not a lot. And yeah, that's just due to the way that CurviBlend uses those internal segments to produce a curve. So that's where our groups come in really handy. I'll go ahead and create a new group. So when I hit new group with these curves selected, it's going to automatically add them to our group for us. And you can see here under source objects, we've got all of those. If I accidentally missed one, or if I wanted to remove one, I could just remove and add selected. You can see it's added back there. From there, I'll show you quickly as well. It's added a new group in our hierarchy for us. And when we hit find group, it's going to organize all of these new curves, which it just created, into this group 1 curves. And you can see that these are different curves when I've turned this source object off, by the fact that all of these now have control points at each segment, which is great. And this means that CurviBlend will be able to create a nice smooth patch for us. Cool. I think that just about sums it up for this file. I've got another file that I want to quickly jump into. Bear with me while I do that. We can leave that group. Close this one down. Great. So, more groups. So here I wanted to show, again, the group functionality. We can just select all of these. These are, again, individual objects. And we just go ahead, new group, and then we'll hit find loop. And that's found our 5 Bezier segments, and we can turn off the source objects. And that's a really nice, quick, easy way of getting those all those curves out of what would have otherwise been a bit of a tricky task to derive all those curves from those objects. So we can turn those back on, create our patch, and because this instance had 5 objects, we've got the option here to switch through. Great, found a nice curve, found a nice match, and yeah, we can switch this nice bicubic algorithm on, and great. So from here, I just wanted to jump in and show what happens if we want to create a surface from a mesh object. So I'm gonna quickly try and select some edges to delete out, some faces I should say. Cool, and grab those ones. Cool, and then just grab that internal face and delete that faces. Cool. So from here, if we wanted to create a group out of this, a patch from this edit mode sort of selection, that's also again very easy to do. So when we create a new group from edit mode, we're not going to get any objects automatically added to that group. So we can safely create a new group in there, and then go ahead and start selecting our edges, which we want patched. So when we hit add selected from edit mode, it's going to basically pull out this edge for us, create a new source object, and add it to that group. So I'll show you how that works. We add selected, and it's going to go ahead, and in this group 2 here, we've now got this patch object, which is that line there. And we just need to go ahead and do that for each edge. Great, now we have all 4 edges. We can hit that find loop again. That's going to turn those edges into our Bezier segments, and then we can create that patch. Nice and easy, and we can turn that bicubic on if we need to. Cool. Moving on, just to quickly show our tolerance values. So what happens when we've got a little gap in our curves in our set, and we try and create a new patch from that. So we're able to add all these objects to our group easy enough, but then when we try and find our loop with this tolerance value set too low, it's not going to be able to find it. So what we need to do is find it and set this a little higher. I know in this example that gap is about 0.05 meters, and in that case we're able to now find it. Same for when we try and create a patch out of that though. If this end tolerance value is not high enough, we won't be able to create that patch. So we then need to set that value as well to match. And easy. Cool. Moving on, and this is the last example. So here you can see it doesn't look too much more complex than this example over here, where we've got sort of that basically the same shape, but these planes have a bit more of an overlap. And basically that is just going to give us an excess of loop options. Also something to keep in mind, we will need a vertice at each intersection. So for example, these vertices must be in place for us to be able to find the loop that we want. Same as this one here, that vertice must be there. And what I mean by excess loop options, basically when we create a new group here with all of these source objects and run find loops, we'll set this back to the default and hit OK. You can see that takes quite a bit longer, and that's going to exponentially grow the more complex your input shapes are. So just something to be mindful of. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'll quickly show you. So we've also got the option to update patches. So once a group has been created and the patch has been run or created at least once for that group, we then have this update patch option, and that's basically going to store all of our previous settings that we used to create this patch. So I did want to show quickly what happens if we change this input form. So say we wanted to make this now and change this one and then set our control points to match. Great. So it's going to remember, because we're in group 1, it's going to remember all of our input geometry, and this is still part of that input geometry. It's just been altered, but we will just need to run that find loop again. So when we do that, great, it's again found those 5 Bezier curve segments, and we can update our patch, and it's now using that new geometry. And also I wanted to show, this is a really good example of our bicubic versus bilinear. So when I switch that back to bilinear, you can see we get a much sharper transition there compared to bicubic. And we can go ahead and delete that patch out now. Cool. That just about sums it up. Thank you for sticking with me this far. And if you have any questions, please just reach out. Just an email away. So thank you.